Race Talk, where we are learning together, growing together, and building bridges. I am your co host, Darnell Benson, along with my co host.
I'm Wheeler Castaneda.
And we are so glad that you guys are joining us here. Whether you are watching it on Facebook through the YouTube or you're actually at the YouTube site, thank you for being here. We're going to first spend a couple of minutes catching up with some things that have been happening in the world. But before I do that, I want to ask my co-host a question. Wheeler, last week you were actually hosting in Kentucky. Where are you at this week?
This week I am in Ohio. I'm visiting family in Ohio. My father lives here, so visited family in Kentucky, and then came to Ohio. Then I will be going back to Kentucky and continuing to travel until I go back to Brooklyn.
So you live in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I live in Brooklyn, and I work in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah. All right. As you know, I'm an educator. How about you? What is your actual occupation?
I'm also an educator. I'm a science teacher. It's exciting tonight because we do have one of our friends on, Mr. Aaron Gilbert, who's also an educator. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say and ask him a few questions about his experience as an educator.
Awesome. Well, get to some current events for us, sir.
Yeah, so a few things happening. I just found out about Brett Hankinson, the officer, one of the officers involved in Breonna Taylor's shooting, has been fired by his police department, and he's appealing it. He's appealing being fired, but he has been fired. So that's a step in the right direction.
Can you update us real quick on that whole Breonna situation, so that those who may not be actually aware of this case can know exactly why this officer was fired?
Yeah, so they were issued a no knock, or they went out on a no knock warrant, which means that they could just come into your home and arrest you without any kind of warning, any kind of anything. So he was one of the officers that was involved in that no knock warrant, and he fired 10 shots into the home of Breonna Taylor. The really tragic thing is that the person that they were looking for was already incarcerated, was already in jail. And then Breonna Taylor was, a great person in the community. EMT, had a great reputation, and so he was one of those people involved in that.
All right.
The other thing I have is that the three men involved in Ahmaud Arbery's case, they've just been indicted today as well. So that's moving. I actually, on the news, Ahmaud Arbery's mother was talking a little bit about, saying her prayers have been answered. Georgia actually it's pretty groundbreaking. They've passed in Georgia, the first hate crimes bill has been passed.
Nice.
And yeah, absolutely. And of course, Ahmaud Arbery's mother said, it's definitely, she's happy about this, but her son shouldn't have had to have died for this to be going on, to be happening.
So if you guys aren't aware, the whole Ahmaud Arbery case, that was a young black gentleman who was jogging in a neighborhood and was approached by two men in a truck who eventually lost his life over that, as they were accusing him of being a burglar, which that all turned out not to be true.
Right. Yeah. And there was actually a third person as well in that, and they've all been indicted, which is, it's good. I mean, and it's tragic, but it's good that they're being held accountable for their awful actions.
Right.
I do want to get through a lot of this because we're trying to cut down our time as well, and I want to give most of the time to Aaron to talk. Another thing that happened that I thought was really interesting is that Mary Elizabeth Taylor, who is the Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs, and who was viewed by the Trump administration as someone who was loyal and someone who was effective, has resigned. She resigned last week, and I'm going to read you a little bit of her letter of resignation.
What race is she?
She's African American. Thank you. She's an African American woman, serving, I think, since day one in the president's cabinet as administration. Thank you. But here's part of her resignation letter. It says, "Moments of upheaval can change you, shift the trajectory of your life, and mold your character. The president's comments and actions surrounding racial injustice in Black Americans cut sharply against my core values and convictions. I must follow the dictates of my conscience and resign as Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs. I'm not going to get into any points of view that I have about Trump or anything like that, but I think that letter, her being an African American woman saying those things, speaks volumes about the state of our country right now. I'm not going to say anything else about that. Yeah. I did have one last thing. There was an officer who was just suspended without pay after a few hours after this video came out. The person involved, his name was Ricky Bellevue, and this officer had him in an illegal chokehold. I've seen the video several times. You can look for the video as well. The officer had him in an illegal chokehold. There were bystanders who were taking footage with their phones of this incident happening, and they were shouting at the officers to stop. One of the bystanders shouts out, "He's choking him," and one of the officers responds, "He's not getting arrested. He's going to the hospital." So that was one of the responses that the officers had. So the DA is not going to charge Ricky Bellevue, the gentleman being choked, the African American being choked, for disorderly conduct, which is good. He's home now. He's happy to be home. The disturbing thing is in 2014, August of 2014, Officer Afanado, I think I'm saying his name right, Afanador, was seen on camera, and he was acquitted of this, of pistol whipping a 16-year-old black teenager for possession of marijuana. You can see the video as well. It was him and another officer, but David Afanador, Officer Afanador was seen pistol whipping him, cracking his teeth, and beating him pretty badly, and he was acquitted of all charges in that 2014 event. So this is again an ongoing thing of officers with pasts.
So this is the same officer.
Correct.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
In both cases. So those are just some quick updates that I wanted to make sure people are aware of if you hadn't already heard of those. Let's get to the meat of our program, though. Let's introduce our guest, Mr. Aaron Gilbert, who is an educator, like I said before, and ask him a few questions. That sound good, Darnell?
Yes. Ready to get Aaron on here. Aaron, reveal yourself, sir.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, so glad to see you, sir. Aaron, tell us a little bit about our history that you have with myself and Willer and our producer, Mr. Rainwater.
Our history. Well, we are all former co-workers we all worked at Enlace Academy together, and it was fun. It was fun working with you guys. It was, I think, just coming in and really being excited. Wheeler was already there, but me, Darnell, and Rainwater, we were all new coming in, and just the way we were able to connect and the way we still contact each other and we still hang out. I think that's speaks volumes of our relationships. So
it was a good time.
It was.
Yeah. Sir. The good times continue. Aaron, I have a question for you. We talked on Monday and went through some things, and one thing that struck me as very interesting that I didn't know about you. I knew that you went to Ball State, but I didn't know this. You told me that you were only one of 3 Black students on campus at Ball State, and can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that?
Well, let me kind of correct you. I was one of maybe 3 in my major.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's huge difference. I mean, there were compared to the white population, we were definitely the minority, but in my actual major that I was in, I was one of very, very few. And like I said on Monday, it felt like that I was always having to compete with the other people in my class in my major, just because the way things were being taught and the content, it was not relevant for me at all. So it always felt like I had to push harder and fight harder to get things done. And just really, you could definitely tell the content that was being taught. It wasn't right. Most of the content would work great in you know, schools that have predominantly white students in school and private schools, but the things that were taught. I remember my very first year teaching, and just I'm a physical education teacher, and my very first year teaching PE, I was looking at all this curriculum that I got from college, and none of it worked. Not, like I couldn't do anything. I basically had to create my own curriculum based off where I was at, because I couldn't. There was a disconnect from what they taught me and what reality actually was. So it was definitely a learning experience. Doing 4 years at the college, and you would think I would be able to use something there, but I had to create my own thing. So.
What was that major that you went to Ball State for?
It was physical education and health education.
Physical education and health. And so your current occupation is?
I'm still a PE teacher.
PE teacher.
Yeah.
And so how many African-American males actually work at the school you're currently at?
We have one gentleman who he is our day custodian. He's there in the day, and then there's me, and I'm the only Black male that actually teaches any children at that school.
And how many students in that school?
I would say a little less than 500, maybe
so
more.
How many staff, probably?
Yeah, close to probably about 30, I would say. If I had to guess, I mean, yeah.
About right there. Okay,
Yeah.
So being the only African-American male educator there in the building, how do you think this has affected you both professionally and personally?
Professionally, it's definitely a wake-up call, just because, I mean, sometimes I do feel like there are things that I can't do or things I can't say or talk about because I'm the only one there. And people may see it differently as I do, things like that. And personally, which it kind of goes in with the professional side, there's a lot of pressure being the only one there. Because I feel like, especially with majority of our Black boys and Black girls, I feel like there's a pressure to, you know, as far as doing more, in doing, and I'm trying to find a way to explain it, but there's definitely pressure, especially when it comes to like discipline and, you know, teaching things outside of the classroom, things that should be taught that's not taught. You definitely feel an obligation to do more, because I'm the only one there. And if stuff's not getting done, that kind of I feel like it falls back on me, right? Because since it's not being done, it's my job to do it, right? So
then this is a pressure or a weight that you feel that you have put on yourself, but that also that you feel like you owe to the students.
Yeah. I've definitely taken that responsibility to go above and beyond and do the extra things that would not normally be done. For example, I hold after school programs. Like I have my own boys mentor group, and I do things like Donuts with Dads, and I helped this past school year. I was holding programs like Cuts and Conversations where boys would come in and get free haircuts. And I did another program called Motivation and Manicures with girls. Girls came in and got their nails done for free. Like stuff like that, I feel like would not be done if I was not there.
Because these were all the things that you have implemented yourself, right?
Right, yes.
Right. So the student body there, what race is predominantly in the school?
African American.
African American.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you're the only African American male teacher.
Right.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see that weight being an issue for you. So then, what about the weight or pressure that you might be feeling professionally, also from the others who are not of African American ethnicity in the building? And by that, I mean the other teachers. Is there a weight that you feel there or a pressure that you have?
There used to be. I've been at my current school. I'm at Sunny Heights Elementary, and that's in Warren Township. My first year there was definitely a weight because I didn't know anybody there, and when you don't know people, you don't know how people will respond, react to things, or even how, even how they teach or things like that. But I think just being there for 2 years, I think that weight from other teachers, or me thinking that weight is there from other teachers, I honestly don't think it's there, because now I feel like I am able to be more of myself, and I know there are teachers there who are amazing, that work amazing with those kids, and just seeing that and seeing them do the extra stuff and go above and beyond for those kids, kind of takes the weight off what I feel like I have to do.
So you feel like your support base, though, being the only African American male, has been good?
Yes and no. I will say, with those programs, things that I want to do, my principal, he just says, I give him my idea, he just says, do it, right? So, I mean, he doesn't really ask me. He really doesn't ask for any feedback or anything. If there's something I want to do, and I'm able to, and if it fits on the calendar or whatever, I'm pretty much able to do what I want. Now, actually, support from, and I will say, the general support for those different events that I do from the teachers is really good. It could always be better, but it generally is really good from a support standpoint.
So these programs that you have implemented, like the haircuts, how do you think this has affected your relationship and your connection with your students?
I think it's helped, just because I'm in an unconventional role, because I'm not in the classroom. So the things that I do, it's not going to really be based off what they're learning in the classroom. I feel like kids need what they're learning in the classroom is important, but they also need experiences from other things. So that's where I feel like I excel the best at, just seeing kids outside of the classroom and seeing them in a totally different space. So things like seeing kids get their haircuts, and I had one parent even reach out to me. She said her son got a haircut one time, and like it was pretty much a traumatic experience because the haircut was so bad, right? He was like, kids were making fun of him, but after the haircut he got from that program, he felt so much better about himself. You know what I'm saying? He felt really good about himself. So she was just thanking me for that. So I think things like that really improves the relationship I have with those kids, because even though it's a school event, I see them in a different space and they see me in a different space also.
Right. So all of that is still a part of culture. And though you are African American male and you're implementing these programs, do you think that your reach goes beyond the African American student body as far as
did we lose Darnell there?
We lost Darnell there, yeah.
Yep, I think we lost him for a second.
All right. Aaron, can you did you get the gist of the question though? Do you think your reach goes further than just the African American community at your school?
Oh yeah, I think I am. I'm not there just to serve, the African American kids. I'm there to serve the whole population. So having those relationships with all the students is, my goal, and doing things like teaching PE. It provides me the flexibility and the opportunity to reach every single student. So
I got distracted.
So I think that's definitely been a plus. So I definitely think that reach does go beyond African American students as well. It reaches the whole population.
No, you're good. With what?
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry, Darnell's back.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I've seen you in action. Darnell has too. Aaron and I used to his gym class was right next to when I was teaching art before I taught science art room, and I've definitely come to Aaron for help. I'm looking at these kids, and so not just African American kids, but like just students in general. You did say something that I was interested in asking you about, but I can follow up with that later, Darnell, if you want to go ahead and ask some questions.
So cultural awareness training, which embodies educators receiving training to know how to deal with students of different cultures that they may not be familiar with, how to connect with them, and so many other things in those parameters. Do you believe that cultural awareness training should be mandatory in education for any educators?
Yes, and I feel that way because, especially in a school like mine, when the population is mostly African American kids, just knowing how to react and how to not just discipline, but teach and speak and interact with the majority of your population, I think that would help. But I also think it only goes so far, because we have amazing teachers who work with these kids outside of the school. So they see these kids outside of the school, they go to their neighborhoods and they see some of the things that these kids actually deal with. See, culture sensitivity training doesn't really share with you, how kids are only eating one meal a day, right? How a 10-year-old boy is having to look out for his younger brothers and sisters because his parents aren't there. Like it only goes so far. So yes, it is important, but I also think teachers have to do more to get a better relationship with the kids that they're educating and they see every single day.
I agree. I totally love that. So what other ways then can educators of another ethnicity form bonds and connections with their students?
Just some of the things that I've seen at my school, teachers bond. They make those connections through music. They make it through sports. They make it through art. Art and STEM, things like that. The teachers who will go to kids' basketball games and football games and things like that. So just doing things extra that are outside the classroom really helps. But also just taking the time to know your student, like what your student doesn't like, what they like, favorite food, favorite color, things like that. These things are small, but they're so important. One thing that I don't know if this is this has anything to do with it, but you see all these videos with these students who get in these physical altercations with these teachers, right? And I always question, and people are always so quick to blame the student. Mm-hmm. But I like to play devil's advocate and say, well, what is the teacher's relationship with that student? Like how did it get to that point to where the teacher didn't know, right, the student well enough to say, hey, maybe, I shouldn't say this because it's going to trigger something, or maybe I shouldn't do this because it's going to trigger something. Like all the responsibility can't be on the student, right? The teachers have to be responsible to know their students as well.
That's very true. And I can just think in my educational career of some of the students who I've even expelled as an administrator, who up until this day, we're very tight. We're very close. They love and respect me, though they were hurt from the expulsions. the bond that we formed because I knew them well, and they knew me well, is something amazing to me when I think about it. But a lot of that is that I really listen to them. I want to know why they feel the way they feel about different situations and things in life. And I like to know how they feel without many times even giving my opinion on it until they ask me what my opinion is.
Right.
And I think that's something that's important, listening and then not always giving an opinion, because opinion sometimes will mean that you're devaluing to kids. You're devaluing what they just said. So I usually wait until they ask me what my opinion is on that subject. I'm gonna give you one other question, and then I'm gonna let Willer follow up, and then Michael had put something up we're gonna hit too. So African American history has been more than lacking, of course, in the textbooks in our classrooms. There is so much more I learned growing up from my parents and from my grandparents, and even some of the ethnic magazines such as Jet and Ebony, and so on and so forth. When I went to college, I decided I wanted to learn more, as I knew we were lacking so much. And so I took 2 Black history classes. So whose job is it, besides the teachers, then, to fill the gaps of Black history?
Besides the teaching, I think it definitely falls back on the parents and the other adults that the student has relationships with, to make sure that they're getting what's not being taught. And I think there has to be a value on our history. Obviously, they don't value it if they're leaving it out, and there's huge gaps missing from our history. Even when it comes to February and Black History Month, and schools, they don't really do much or do enough, right? I think because the value of our culture, the history, just isn't there. So if it's not there in the education system, then it's definitely going to have to fall back on the parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles to fill in those gaps, and make sure that these kids know our history and know where they came from and things like that.
Awesome. Willer, you had a question.
Yeah, I have 2 quick questions, but yeah, I agree with that too on history. It's extremely important for people to know their history, because I think that's where you start to get that sense of pride of who you are and where you come from, right? And if it's totally negated, especially in the curriculum, like what are we saying, or what are they, what's the message, what's the message to children, and then they pick up on that, at a very young age. So I've been in a lot of schools where I've seen the student body has been, about 99%, African American or people of color, and they don't really have a lot of teachers who represent who they are as a student body. So, do you think that it is important for people who hire in teachers, especially in communities that are predominantly, people of color? Do you think it is important to have teachers of color so that the students can see themselves represented in the administrative body or the teaching body?
Yeah, I'm always a firm believer. I think I have so much success just beyond. Listen, I'm not the best at writing lesson plans and things like that. So one of my major successes is the relationship with the kids, because I look like them, I talk like them, we listen to the same music, we wear the same shoes, things that we can connect to, right? So if kids are never seeing these things, what do they have to connect to, right? So I definitely think it is important for administrators, to hire people of color, but at the same time, it's important for other men like myself, other women like myself, to apply for these jobs, so that way they can get into the schools and help make changes. And what I've been doing really quickly, when I found out that this pressure that I was feeling was getting a little too heavy, I would go on Facebook and I would ask for volunteers, and I would ask for people just to come in and just help, do something, do lunch duty, help come in, read read a book to the kids, do something so that way kids can see themselves in a sense, right? So
Yeah, and I remember that you, Will, another friend of ours, was somebody that came in when we were working in Law State to help out as well. Another really great guy who I'm really close with as well. One other thing you said was interesting to me. You said, but when you got out of college and you went into the classroom, there was a disconnect there. There was like you weren't really prepared to for like your education didn't prepare you for the reality of what teaching was. Right. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. Most of I'll even go back to when I was student taught. Now I'm in Muncie. I actually requested to student teach in Muncie just because of the population. They sent my very first student teaching. They sent me all the way out to Darnell, I don't know if you know where this is, Jay County, which is based like right on the Indiana-Ohio border, but it's like farm town, things like that. I mean, it was like 95% white, right? So the things that I got from Ball State, they worked amazing at that school, right? But when I student taught back in Muncie at the Bottomley African American School, I couldn't do the same thing. Now, granted, one was high school, one was elementary, but there was so much stuff I couldn't do because the stuff they were teaching me wasn't relevant enough. So there was definitely a disconnect. And I use this for example. Like we had to take courses like camping and badminton and table tennis. Most African American kids don't know what badminton is unless they're exposed to it. And not a lot of PE teachers just have a badminton court and net just hanging around, right? So, and these are things that they pushed. These are activities that they push you to teach in these schools. Well, I can't do that because I don't have the resources to do it. So I had to create something other than what they taught.
Well, you're fantastic at it, man. I mean, yeah, hopefully one day you will be administration. That'd be great. Yeah, I know.
He would be great as an administrator.
Really would.
I think his patience is good too. His temperament is great. Yeah. For these last 5 minutes, we're going to bring in our producer, Michael Rainwater, and I'm going to let him make this parallel that he has seen in education and also in criminal law. So, Michael, can you join us, please?
Yeah, I am. Unfortunately, hang on 1 second. Okay, I had you on the speaker. I got to make sure I don't give everybody a big loop feedback because I am producing the show live while we're talking. So, yeah, I realized pretty quickly that there's a lot of interesting parallels. I loved when you said, Aaron, how it's the responsibility of the teacher to build strong relationships with their students because those relationships, the foundation, as we all know, of a safe and strong community in the classroom. And to me, as like a sociologist and as a teacher, the classroom is a microcosm of the community. And, you have leaders in the classroom, just like you have leaders in the community. And when the leaders in the classroom see the person who's charged with, keeping that community safe, the teacher in this case, or in the case of law enforcement, the police officers out in the field, we really have to ask ourselves, whose responsibility is it to keep the safety of all involved at the paramount of the situation? Because, people talk about how, you can't, it's not the same because teachers are dealing with little kids. And I know you all have taught middle school and even some high school, some of us, and we know that at some point kids are just as big and just as threatening, sometimes more so than adults. And yet as teachers, we are expected not to kill our students. It's a pretty basic expectation, pretty straightforward. And I think if you saw a teacher kill a student on TV, that teacher would not only not have a job, they'd be criminally charged instantly. There'd be an investigation. It'd be huge. But yet, for some reason, because you're a leader outside the classroom in the community as a law enforcement officer, there's this tendency to victim blame. And while I'm not one as a member of the community to advocate for violence, aggression, resisting arrest even if you feel wrongly accused. Yeah, that's something that we all generally want to do. But there are times when you're emotionally compromised, you're in a hot situation, there's been an accident, there's something dangerous going on, someone's intoxicated. People, for whatever reason, the situation, are not able to logically assess, stop, and comply in that manner. And the responsibility for me, just like you pointed out in the classroom, has to fall up. It doesn't fall down on the people that are compromised in the situation, that are at the bottom of the power differential. It falls up to the people that are in the position of power to ensure the safety of everyone in the situation. And I think if people could recognize that as the core issue we're having, and who's being targeted, of course, is a big issue as well. I'm not trying to sidetrack that by any means. I just thought it was a really interesting parallel that when we talk about all these situations in law enforcement across the country, as we try to process our feelings and deal with what's going on, we have to keep in mind that as members of the community, responsibility has to trickle up. It has to fall upward. The people who are in positions of power are the ones who have to maintain safety and order. They're the ones who have the training. They're the ones who are supposed to maintain their composure. They're the ones who are supposed to make sure that even when, a student or a suspect is spitting in your face, kicking at you, punching at you, not in their right mind, your goal should always be to keep them and yourself safe, period.
And I would like to say, and I would like to say, like I've said before here on the show, is I know several police officers and some even our family. And I'm not going to say this police officer's name, but she works at a school and she's very successful as one of those officers there. The reason why she is because she takes her job very seriously, not just as being powerful in that position, but the relationships that she has built, not only with her students that she's in charge of, but also with their families. And so she's very popular because of how she makes sure that she invests in the community in which she patrols. And so if there be, I know several others just like her, but I decided just to highlight her. But yeah, if we have more who are doing that, both as police officers and as educators, there's all kinds of gaps we can start closing here and build bridges that will be built.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I like how you said responsibility, Michael. I did jury duty a few months ago, and basically one of the questions they asked me pretty much was about environments. And do I think pretty much a police officer's environment pretty much, has anything to do with the way they react to things? And pretty much I told them straightforward, me being a teacher, me being a PE teacher, it's my responsibility to know the environment that I'm in and be responsible for those people that are in my environment. I just can't be in my office all day while kids are playing around and not know what's happening in my environment, and then expect the kids and then get mad at the kids, right, when something goes down. So basically, I think it's the same for, like you said, these leaders, these officers in the community. Even when stuff happens, it's your responsibility to know the environment and know the people within that environment, so that way you can make clear, safe decisions, not only for yourself, but the people who are in the environment also.
Yep. And I think you have to keep in mind, with police officers and with teachers, it's an occupation. You can walk away from it. You have a choice. You have chosen this job. You've chosen these difficult conditions. You know the reality of it. And that's not an excuse for bad behavior. It's not in law enforcement, and it's not in education. And I think, you have to recognize that people of color, just like students in a classroom, can't just take that off and walk out. They're students are required to be in that, and sometimes students will physically try to run, but what happens is the system pushes them right back in there and is designed to keep them in that space. Just like and we'll talk about this. I know we have a guest star coming up in the future, Frond, who's going to talk about redlining and how even geographically we've kept people of color in certain areas and communities for the same type of situations. This is to argue this is not systematic. It just means you're not paying attention. You're ignoring details to make a convenient story that's comfortable. But the uncomfortable truth is that there is evidence everywhere that we've been set with this expectation of blaming victims and not looking upwards for responsibility and not recognizing that there are disadvantaged groups of people, predominantly people of color, who the system has been designed for many places across the system have been designed to keep them in a certain space, physically, socially, emotionally, and mentally. And until we break down those agents within our systems and our institutions and redistribute that concept to be that we all have a valid voice, that our voices are all equal and we all deserve to be treated equally, we're not going to get the result we're looking for. And I think this goes back to the earlier point we made, where it starts with each one of us individually, our interactions with the teachers in the classroom, modeling and teaching respect to one another, the educators that are above them, the administrators teaching respect to their teachers so the teachers feel respected enough to show the students respect, just like you have to have law enforcement treating people in the community in a respectful manner to earn respect and the right to be there from that community. It always falls up for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great comment, because we have a lot as educators. There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we can do to help out the communities that we serve. For sake of time, though, we are going to wrap this up. I want to thank Mr. Aaron Gilbert for joining us today and sharing his insights in education and his experiences in the education system. So thank you so much. We will be meeting again at the same time, same place, 7:30 Wednesday, with our next guest, Fran, that Michael spoke about a little bit. But until then, thanks all for listening. Thanks for joining in. Again, thank you so much, Aaron, for being here. And I will talk to you guys soon.
Take care, everyone.